We previously looked at defining flipped learning in terms of it being a complementary blend of synchronous and asynchronous learning. However, when it comes to implementing the model, it's not like flipping a switch. The approach requires a fundamental redesign of your teaching that impacts the role of the learner, the role of the educator, and requires reflection and iterative improvement over a number of deliveries. The advantages of well-designed flipped learning include improved learning experience and outcomes for students, and I believe an improved teaching experience for you. But there can be challenges to initial implementation of flipped learning, such as disengaged learners, which can be discouraging and can lead you to revert back to traditional approaches. So what can we do to get through the early difficult stages of adoption to reap the future benefits of a well-designed flipped learning approach? In this video, we'll look at 6 challenges that you may come across and suggest solutions to overcome them. Based on my experience, I think these are the top 6 challenges, with students not doing pre-session content is the most common challenge, which we'll cover at the end. Okay, so number 1 is that flipped learning is likely an unfamiliar approach to educators, as many of us are products of traditional teaching and learning methods. So we tend to teach how we ourselves were taught, because subconsciously we see this as a model of success that's gotten us where we are in our careers. However, learning and teaching practices have moved on through evidence-based research, and we also have learners now with a wide variability, and therefore approaches such as flipped learning can offer a more effective learning experience for the majority of our students. So the suggestion for this first challenge is that educators need to understand why they are implementing this approach. How has it been done in their discipline? And embrace a reflective approach to the implementation and improvement of future sessions. You may not get it right the first time, and that's okay. Identifying what went well and what needs improvement is the key. Also, from an institutional perspective, training and support should be offered in the pedagogical and technological aspects of flipped learning design to support educators' transition. It's also likely the approach is unfamiliar to students, so they may be surprised and resistant to the concept of pre-session content and more active learning in the session time. They may find it too demanding to learn a new educational approach and try and understand the course material at the same time. So what can we do? Well, there's huge advantage in the educator being able to justify the approach and share the benefits to students. And this may have to be reinforced on a number of occasions. Personally, I never flip the first session with a new set of students, and instead I dedicate a portion of the session to explaining the purpose of the flipped approach, how it will help them, and what they can expect. Students then have a chance to voice their concerns, and this helps to give insight into those that might struggle initially and identify necessary support and instructions to try and alleviate stress. Resistance to a new way of doing things is common. When something is challenging your existing beliefs, we engage in this process called cognitive conflict. So the more we can reassure and support our learners, the more likelihood is they will accept the approach. Also, it's a good idea to start small and give students time to go through the process and to self-regulate their approach and figure out how they will adapt to the new model. How will they learn from digital content, maybe highlighting the flexibility of video, for example? And how will they work in groups or during active learning activities? You may even bring your pre-session content into the live session time initially, walk them through it, and then push the content outside of the session the following week. Challenge number 3 is increased workload for educators. And there's no getting away from this. If you've been delivering the same lecture year after year, and then suddenly you move to redesign to a flipped approach, there's going to be some increased effort. Specifically, if you want to create mini video lectures. The suggestion here to lessen the strain is to 1, increase the amount of active learning in your live session, therefore requiring the students to do something rather than you to deliver. Remember, the person that's doing the work is the one that's learning. So shift this emphasis onto your students. When it comes to digital content, first look at what you can curate. There are many great resources that have already been created and are available under Creative Commons licenses for you to use and adapt, so you can check out what open education resources are already available. When you're ready to start creating material, start small and progressively build over time. The more content you can develop digitally will free you up more and more as time goes on. Another option is to create content collaboratively, either with your colleagues or even better, with your students. The fourth challenge is students' perceived increase in workload. So rather than sitting back, listening to a lecture, they now have pre-session content to complete, then they are coming to a session to work on things, either individually or collaboratively. So firstly, as mentioned, the ability to reinforce and justify the approach is key. The second thing to consider is that flipped learning is a repurposing model, not an additive model. So what I mean by this is that many educators tend to add on to existing sessions. So they will add video or readings or forums to existing sessions. But if we think about the purpose of the flipped approach, it's to achieve the same learning outcomes more efficiently or effectively. Adding more content is not the solution to this. Removing introduction to concepts or topics or other lower order thinking activities from the live class time and moving them to the individual self-directed learning space to allow for more higher order thinking activities to be done in the session time is the key to this approach. And if anything, at least initially, it's a good idea to overestimate the time for pre-session content and in-session active learning activities to allow students to acclimatize. Another challenge is that some students complain that they are not able to ask questions during pre-session activities to help with clarification and understanding. So they feel they are not being supported. This can lead to frustration, as students are often expected to use their newly acquired knowledge in the following live session. So unanswered questions may lead to misconceptions and knowledge gaps, hindering the live session activities. The suggestion here, therefore, is to provide students with increased communication options, both formal and informal. Formal options might include a Q&A forum or a Padlet dedicated to questions on the specific activity, and that allows students to support each other by responding to questions, with you only intervening if necessary. Informal options may include the encouragement of social media to communicate, such as WhatsApp groups or Discord servers. Again, I would step back from these forms of communication to allow the students to self-regulate the environment, maybe having a spokesperson or two that can reach out to you with any questions. And finally, the biggest challenge that educators have in flipped learning implementation is the lack of engagement in pre-session content. Now, I hope that all of the previous suggestions would go some way to addressing this issue of ownership and responsibility for learning on the student's part. However, one additional suggestion that could help is to consider students' motivation and design accordingly. So try to ensure that pre-session content is explicitly linked to learning outcomes and in-session activities, and that it's not just seen as busy work. For digital learning content, consider breaking down your content into small, manageable chunks. No one wants to sit and listen to a 60-minute plus lecture video. So can you break down that content, rework the script to be an engaging and concise narrative, supported with relevant visual graphics? Can you create videos that explain concepts in terminology that's relatable to your students? Also, linking the pre-session content to some formative assessment can help motivate students to complete and give you an insight into what's been understood and what may need further discussion. This assessment can be part of the pre-session content or at the start of the live session, or both. Okay, so we've covered 6 potential challenges to implementing the flipped learning approach and a whole bunch of possible solutions. I really believe this is such a beneficial and enjoyable approach when things start to click, so it's worth sticking with it and refining over time. If you found this video useful, please hit like and share any other useful approaches you have in the comments below.